He is suffering in his own mind more than anybody can imagine.
It was 12:48 in the morning, when most people were asleep in their beds, when a guy was driving down the road in Franklin, Indiana, when he came across an abandoned car in the middle of the road. He pulled over to the side of the road and went to have a look. The driver's door was open, the keys were still in the ignition, and a lady's purse was on the passenger side. He called 911 straight away, and when they turned up, they checked the purse and saw it belonged to Kelly Eckhart. After checking the area, there was no sign of Kelly. Had she wandered off, or had she been abducted? Hi, my name's Sara Jade and welcome to my channel, where we talk about true crime, solved cases and more. Now let's get on with this week's case. Kelly Nicole Eckhart was 17 years old and grew up in a small farming town in Bogstown, Indiana, where she was known by everyone. She was described as very cheerful, bright, and always very happy. She had loads of friends, was very sweet, and was very close to her family.
My daughter Kelly was a straight A student. She was National Honor Society, top 15 of her class every year of high school.
Kelly was very smart. She helped me do my school stuff if I ever needed a hand.
She was always there to help if somebody needed help. She really cared about people.
Kelly was a very big people person. She was very happy, very peppy. She had a lot of school spirit.
Since an early age, Kelly had always wanted to study at Franklin College, and she had just been accepted into the school to study accounting. She was thrilled as she had always wanted to go. She showed her dedication by making sure she could afford to get in. She applied for scholarships and also got a job at the local Walmart. It was said that Kelly loved her job as she loved helping people, so it was a great fit. Being so close to her family, Kelly didn't want to stay in the dorms, so she opted to stay at home. This meant that every day she would travel to college, then after school go to work, then go home, study before going to bed. That day she got up early and went to have a shower when her mum came in to say goodbye, as she did every morning. She told her mum she loved her, and off she went to work. A little while later, Kelly left for school and finished her last class around 4 p.m. that day. After school, she drove to Walmart to start her shift. When she finished work, she met up with her boyfriend, Anthony, and they went round shopping for about an hour before they left around 11:10 that evening. They both lived in different directions, so they said their goodbyes before getting in their cars and driving home. However, Kelly never made it back. After they found her wallet, the police phoned Kelly's mum and asked her if she had seen her. They told her that they had found her car abandoned on the side of the road, just a couple of miles away from her house. Kelly's mum started to get worried, as she knew Kelly wouldn't just leave her car and would have just come straight home. She went down to the police in Franklin and started to help them in any way that she could. When checking the car, they found no signs of struggle. The keys were in the ignition and nothing had been taken from the car. They did find a small dent in her rear bumper, which looked like she had been hit. They believed Kelly got out of her car after being hit to have a look. The next morning, and there's still no sign of Kelly, the police intensified their search, as they believed Kelly might have got out of her car and wandered off somewhere and got lost. The whole community got involved and were out in force looking for her. They were searching all the cornfields and byways all across town. Even some of the children from her school were checking all the barns and sheds in the area to make sure she wasn't there. However, there was no sign of Kelly. Bogstown had always been a close-knit community, where everyone looked out for one another and everyone felt safe. This started to scare the community, and people started to get worried about their own children. After tracking her movements that day, the police realised that her boyfriend Anthony had been the last person to see her, so they went to ask him some questions. Anthony was so distraught that they were questioning him and couldn't quite believe that they thought he was involved. He told them straight away there had been no problems between him and Kelly. He had no reason to be angry at Kelly and certainly wasn't involved in her kidnapping. He soon got an attorney and he refused to let Anthony speak to the police, which meant they had to look elsewhere. They processed her car for any DNA, but they were unable to find anything apart from a few fingerprints on her roof. However, after investigating this, they found out that it belonged to her brother. That morning he had been messing with her and started to shake her car, and while shaking her car he had left his fingerprints on her roof. 4 days later and there's still no sign of Kelly. The community are still out there looking for her, but some of them start to get worried they're going to come across her body. On the 30th of September in Browns County, Indiana, 2 women were out searching for their dog. While they're walking down the road looking for their dog, they came across something in the ditch. At first they thought it was a dummy, but when they got closer, they saw it was a partly clothed girl who'd been dumped on the side of the road. They called 911 straight away, and soon her body was identified as Kelly's. Her mum was numb, and the whole community were in shock. They became so scared they started to give the girls in the area self-defence and safety lessons in the local church. After finding her body, the police were able to clear her boyfriend, as all his whereabouts had been accounted for, and he had no time to go down to Brownstown to dispose of her body. When processing Kelly's body, they found a strange mark on her head. It looked like a gunshot, but it hadn't penetrated the skin. The killer had also used the straps from her bib and one of her shoelaces to tie up and tie around her neck and strangled her to death. They also noticed that her shoes were missing, so they sent a message around to everyone to look out for her shoes. During the autopsy, they also found DNA on her body. They also worked out that the mark on her head had been from a blank gun or a starter pistol. They believed she had been shot, but instead of killing her, it just made her unconscious. They started to paint a picture where they believed that Kelly had been hit by a car, and when she got out, they shot her, made her unconscious, and put her in the back of their car. The only other evidence they had was that a witness had seen a white van speed past on the day she was kidnapped, but they had little information on the car. So they were able to work out how Kelly was abducted and killed, but had no evidence on who killed her, and the case went cold. Nearly a month later, on the 22nd of October 1997, and the police received a call from a young lady. She described how she found a pair of shoes down a pit toilet in the park in South Johnson County. The shoes were quickly identified as Kelly's, and one of the shoelaces was missing. 2 weeks later, and while 2 lads were walking in Attenbury Park, they came across the remains of another young lady, just 1 mile away from where Kelly's shoes were found. She too had been strangled, and her shoes were missing. The community started to panic and started to think a serial killer was on the loose. The young lady was 26-year-old Sharon Myers from Columbus, Indiana, and soon the police were able to put the community at ease as they had found her killer. Sharon was married and had a 13-month-old son, and she'd been working in HR at Arvin's Industrials. She had last been seen in their car park around 6:15 a.m. in the morning. She never made it into the building and had been missing for 6 months. After speaking to all her friends and family, this led them to her co-worker, Jason Hubble. He had gone to speak to her that morning about his insurance benefits, but became angry when she was cold with him. He abducted her and strangled her to death. Jason was sentenced to 75 years in prison. His DNA was found on Sharon's body. However, when they tested his DNA against Kelly's body, there was no match. They'd found Sharon's murder, but Kelly's was still on the loose. As the police started to believe they'd never find Kelly's killer, they got the break they were looking for. Someone called into the police station and told them to speak to Scott. He had been telling people that it was his brother. Scott had lived in the area his whole life, but he had no connections to Kelly. But after this call, they decided to go and speak to him, and he soon opened up and told them that it was his brother, Michael Dean Overstreet. Michael was born on the 18th of November 1966 and grew up in Johnson County, Indiana. This is where he met his wife, Melissa. Melissa had been bullied at school, and Michael had protected her, and soon they started dating. She fell in love straight away, But only after 3 months, he became jealous and possessive and would tell her what to wear and who she could hang out with. He would also have his friends watch her around the school. He told her it was just for her protection, but she knew it was more than that. He would know her every move and who she spoke to. On one occasion, she'd just bought a magazine from a guy for his band, but Michael lost it and brought his gun into school to threaten him. Her friends and family warned Melissa and told her that he was dangerous, but she loved him too much and didn't want to be alone. She ignored them, and soon they were married and had 4 children. Michael became obsessed with weapons and would spend ages cleaning his knives, and his behaviour just got worse and worse throughout their marriage. He could never hold down a job and would just disappear for months on end, telling her he was looking for a job. When he returned, he would tell her that people were following him and he needed to close the windows as they were watching him. Melissa started to think he was having delusional thoughts. He even joined the Marines at one point, but was let go 3 months later for mental health issues. One day, during a fight about the curtains, Michael pulled out a gun. He shot the gun just past Michelle's face, and she decided enough was enough and she was going to leave him. However, it wasn't long before she was back, as she was unable to get full custody of the children, and she didn't want to leave them alone with Michael. So although they lived together, they lived very separate lives. In the earlier hours of the morning, on the 26th of September 1997, Michael called his brother Scott and asked him to pick him up from the Franklin Motel. When his brother got there, he thought it was a bit strange, as he was there with his car. Michael explained that he'd been out drinking with his girlfriend, but they both got drunk and were unable to drive home. He asked Scott if he could just drive him back to his house. When Scott got into the car, Michael went into the back, and when Scott looked behind him, he saw an unconscious woman in the back. While driving home, Michael changed his mind and demanded Scott drop them off at Camp Atterbury. When they got there, Scott pulled over to the side of the road, and Michael dragged the young girl's body out the back of the boot. He told Scott to come back in an hour to pick him up, but Scott refused. So he told him, just go and speak to my wife and tell her to pick me up at the shooting range in about an hour. After Scott left, he drove straight to Michael's house and told Michelle that her husband needed help and she needed to go and pick him up. Michelle was quite confused, but after dropping Scott off at his car, she drove to pick up Michael. Michael appeared dishevelled and sweaty, but didn't say a word. He put his gun and a blanket in the back of the boot before getting in the car. Michelle tried to question him, but he didn't say anything. He just told her if anyone was to ask where he was that night, she was to tell him that he was out drinking with his friends. 2 days later, he took the van that was always dirty to the car wash. After the police questioned Scott, he took them to the place he'd dropped them off. After searching the area, they found her pager, her bracelets and her scrunchie. They were able to get a search warrant for Michael's house, and when they searched the house, they found the stun gun and the blanket that was used to wrap her in. They also searched his van, and they found fibres that linked to Kelly. She was finally arrested and charged for her murder. Michael denied everything and said he didn't remember anything about that night. They believed that he'd seen her at work and waited outside for her to finish her job. When she got into the car, he followed her until he banged into the back of her. She pulled over, got out the car to have a look, and that is when he shot her and made her unconscious. He then put her in the back of the van and drove away with her. On the 18th of May 2000, Michael was found guilty of Kelly's murder and was sentenced to death.
I don't really want to sit and watch somebody die, but for what he did, he deserves to die.
Since Kelly's death, her mum has worked hard to keep her memory alive. They opened up a scholarship in her name at the Franklin College and planted a beautiful tree for her. Her picture is also at the Walmart to help other missing children in the area. Her family also set up Kelly's Law, which gives families the chance to give an impact statement at the sentencing hearing.
A lot of good has happened, and it makes me feel good, makes me smile, makes me happy.
The message her mum wants to promote is to be careful. Not everyone out there is good. If you're driving down a dark road in the middle of nowhere and someone starts flashing you, turn your flashes on to let them know that you've seen them, but then drive to somewhere safe and don't stop until you get there. In November 2014, a judge ruled that Michael was no longer competent to be executed. He had been diagnosed with severe paranoid type schizophrenia, and they could no longer carry out his sentence until he is deemed competent. Thank you for watching, and if you like this one, be sure to check out one of our other videos here. Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.
You call me a saint, but you know I'm a stranger, all willing and